Direct from Foxborough, Massachusetts, the gem of Norfolk County, and taped at the studios of Foxborough Cable Access. It's Foxborough Central. And here's your host, Bob Hickey.
Welcome to another great episode of Foxborough Central. I am Bob Hickey, your host, welcoming you as we talk about the people, events, and organizations that make Foxborough truly the gem of Norfolk County. And I'm pleased to be joined today by Jim DeVellis. Jim.
Morning, Bob.
Good morning, Jim. Is a member of our Board of Selectmen, past chairman, and one of the leading proponents of the formation of a committee that will be voted upon at our annual town meeting this coming May 12th. May 12th?
May 12th.
May 12th. And this committee is called the Child Safety
Committee.
Child Safety Committee. And by way of background, I'll start off and then you can jump in.
Sure.
The allegations which have been, I guess, founded of childhood abuse by former teacher, recreation department leader, and scout leader Bill Sheehan.
Correct. Yep.
On a number of victims here in Foxborough back several decades ago. That came to light over the last couple years, and Sheehan is now a resident of a permanent care facility in Florida suffering from end-stage Alzheimer's. So prosecution is not possible, and of course this program doesn't really focus on assigning blame, although there is plenty of blame to be had, but a thorough investigation is still ongoing, and I understand that the unfortunate piece of that is due to Sheehan's medical condition, that there's not going to really be a way to have complete closure on that. So that is one of the realities. But another reality is that we as a town have taken several steps and need to continue taking more steps to ensure that this sort of thing doesn't happen again. And we've had on this program the Darkness to Light program through the YMCA. There have been townwide trainings that have been going on through that sponsored program. And so much credit to the Y for bringing that to us. But there's more that we as a community can do. And I know that you, fellow Selectman Mark Sullivan, and former Selectman Linda Walsh have worked very hard to not only uncover, but to keep in the forefront and to move forward and create a solution so that there would be a permanent legacy, if you will, of from the ashes to have something positive come out of this. So that's why we're here today, to talk about the annual town meeting warrant article that would propose creating a permanent municipal committee called the Child Safety Committee.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
You nailed it. That's exactly what we're trying to do.
All right. Well, okay, that's just the overview, but now let's get into the whys and what this is really about.
Yep. So, speaking again as a selectman, a little bit of surprised when a year or so ago, some victims came to the selectmen's table and basically said, in a nutshell, through the 60s, the 70s, and into the 80s, Bill Sheehan, who was a former teacher, scout leader, rec director, rec, worked in the rec department.
Well, he also ran the Cocasset River swimming hole.
Yeah, yep. So basically, he systematically molested primarily boys over that decades of abuse. So when the victims came to the selectmen's table, I think everyone was a little surprised. And the question that I asked myself, and I know Linda Walsh and Mark Sullivan have been involved with this from the table at the beginning as well. And you got to remember, back in the day, you went through, it kind of came to light with the churches, the scouts. So it didn't surprise me that it went unchecked for so long.
Sure.
But when my wife grew up here graduated in the 80s, and you ask her or her friends or her brothers, and they kind of said, yeah, we kind of knew what was going on. The younger generation knew. But the question was, how did the adults not do something? How does it go unchecked for so many years? So,
but that's the $1 million question.
That's
really
exactly
faces us as a society, not only in America but worldwide. You see the issues, and not to pick on the Catholic Church. It goes across many different spectrums, but with the years and years of abuse, and you see it in Germany and other places, there just seem to be I don't even want to call it a maturity of the society, where back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, it just wasn't talked about and it was viewed differently. I think it's a much healthier attitude we have now, where we recognize that the victims are not at fault. It really is the perpetrators, and by shielding them, you didn't help your organization, you only perpetrated the cycle of abuse. And so I think now, by exposing the cockroaches for what they are and making them run and stamping them out, that's the important thing to do, which is why I'm so excited about this committee being formed, and why I think it's important that we publicize it here in Foxborough Central, so people will get motivated to come to town meeting on May 12th up at the high school and vote in favor of this.
Yeah. So it's Article 22, and there's almost two parts to it. So back in November, the selectmen appointed a committee. So there is a committee already up and running.
But it's a selectmen's committee.
It's a selectmen's committee, and we put a beginning and an end date to it, and for a couple reasons.
Because it's a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen.
It is.
Which is different than what's being proposed here on the annual town meeting warrant. So I know this because I'm a former selectman.
Yep, you've been through it. So what we wanted to establish was a committee that could understand what the issues are and bring awareness to it. So we set it up with a beginning and an end date, because we weren't sure exactly how it was going to run, and we wanted to change it a little bit. So it wasn't just a committee that we put in the paper and said anyone that wants to join. We thought about it for a while, and we reached out to 7 different areas of town that we thought would be beneficial to have on the committee. And I'll go through them briefly just so you know the depth of it.
Thank you.
So public schools, a big sector of the town. So Deb Spinelli, we reached out to Deb Spinelli as our superintendent, and she's been able to bring a wide variety of training and knowledge to us. The schools are mandated reporters, which is a term that a lot of people didn't know before, so we're starting to learn that. So we've been meeting weekly, every other week, to try to put this committee together, and Deb Spinelli has been in the forefront of that. We reached out to Jeff Downs. Jeff's been here for a very, very long time, and he's on the, at the time he was on the rec board as an alternate member, and we just appointed him to a full-time member. So he's got young children, and he's involved in all the sports, and he could help in that area. On the public safety, we reached out to Detective Tim O'Leary for a couple reasons. He's a little younger. He wasn't involved in that generation from before, and he's also the youth officer, so he's got a connection with a lot of the children. Pastor Bill Dudley from the Union Church, from the beginning he came forward, and he was somewhat of a victim. He was a victim, and he is reaching out to, let me backtrack a little bit. So each one of these people have a responsibility. So Deb Spinelli reaches out to all the different schools.
Yes, no, there's good connectivity.
Jeff Downs is reaching out to all the youth sports, whether it be football, lacrosse, soccer, all of the sports, and kind of bringing them up. Tim O'Leary is providing the technical and the kind of the legal realm of this. And what we've asked Bill Dudley to do is reach out to the other churches. Now, we don't have control over the churches, but there's certain information that can be shared.
Sure.
We can learn from them, they can learn from us. And
it's all about creating a network.
That's exactly what it is. Vicki Lowe. Now, people say, why Vicki Lowe? She's know her as the senior counsel on aging, but she's also human resources.
She's human services.
Yep. So she sees a lot of this stuff, and a lot of the abuse that happens to the children parallels the abuse that happens to the elderly.
Well, it's absolutely important. There's also that parallel, but it's all Foxborough is the Department of Aging and Human Services. So that is.
Yep. And she has a wealth of knowledge on the training.
People sometimes forget that.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I did on this when I first wrote it up. She came back, and Human Resources. Linda Walsh. Now, when this started, she's been a tremendous supporter as a selectman, and now she's filling in the category that we call social institutional. Now, that is the JCs, the different Knights of Columbus, the different private organizations that come into and use town property. So she's reaching out to getting all of that. So, and then the last one is Bob Correa, who is, we call him a resident or a member at large, not tied to any civic organization, but was involved in that era as a child. So he's stepping up.
Okay.
So between these 7 people, what the goal is, we're not creating laws, We're not policing with gates anyone using town property. But what we're trying to do is bring awareness so people can talk about sexual abuse, because it does happen, and I'll tell you, it's going to continue to happen. Every town, you know, the abusers get smarter, but it's bringing awareness.
You know what,
and bringing
that's
education.
such a key point, because it's such an uncomfortable topic, and people, frankly, don't like to talk about it. I mean, it's great we can sit around and talk about the Red Sox all day long, but when we start talking about childhood abuse, you know, people start getting that look, and it's so important to keep this in the forefront. And just because we're talking about it doesn't mean the perpetrators have gone away.
Correct.
They just get a little smarter. And we saw up at our own high school, there was a teacher who had child pornography, and then there, you
right,
see
yeah.
it. And there was just another teacher just a couple weeks back that in another school district, similar issues. And then you saw you know, nationally, it's such an interesting time because there's awareness, and yet there's still the oog factor that people don't want to really acknowledge that people could do something so evil, and yet those people are out there. And so we as a community cannot say, yeah, well, it happened back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It can happen
still happens.
today. It can happen tomorrow. And I think what I like about this proposal is that it memorializes the past abuse into a permanent standing committee, similar to our Committee on Disabilities, similar to our Council on Aging, similar to many of the other, you know, our Cultural Affairs Committee. These are issues that maybe don't interest everybody, but they do need to be part of our government structure. And so this is such
this codifies it right in the government structure.
This is so important to do.
So if you look at, you know, generations ago, people would see things and they'd either look the other way or they'd be embarrassed because it was their family, they didn't want to talk about it. What we're trying to get it towards now by bringing it to the forefront is the training. So the first thing that we did in Jeff Downs, as simple as sending out emails, and worked with several trainers from the school in Darkness to Light, we invited the youth coaches. All of the youth coaches, all volunteers that came, and it was a Friday night and then another one on a Saturday morning. We had over 100 youth coaches, and they watched the training. And simple things like, if you're a coach, you don't spend time alone with a kid. It's 2 coaches to 1 kid. So I know Scouts been doing that for a while.
Too deep leadership,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So looking around, the feedback we were getting from some of the youth coaches was, boy, I didn't know that. Or asking, you know, is there more training? Because in a way, this protects the coaches from doing, you know, by not putting themselves in that position in the first place. So all these little spin-offs are coming out of this.
Because in fairness, a lot of the time, you know, allegations are just that. And in America, we're presumed innocent until proven guilty. And the problem is, as I can't remember who said it, but where do I go to get my reputation back?
And once it's gone, it's gone.
Once it's gone, it's gone. And that's a big piece of the reality of society, is that not only do we need to protect people, but we need to protect ourselves.
Exactly. So this is a step to do that.
It's a great learning opportunity on both sides of the table.
So with all the training and the awareness, you're going to start seeing over the years, if somebody wants to come in and use our town property, a league, a night league, or someone wants to use the chapel for a function, there's going to be a little checkbox, and it might be you got to go online, or you got to get a pamphlet, or you got to sign acknowledgments that you're going to follow a certain protocol. Now, these all sound like good ideas, and in this day and age, I can't see people fighting that. It just seems like common sense. It's going to filter down to the kids. So when a kid walks into a classroom and there's a teacher and the door gets closed and there's no little window on the door, the kid's going to say, a bell's going to ring and say, well, you know, this is not right. Generations ago, that didn't happen. So it's kind of like putting seatbelts on. Kids get in right now and put the seatbelt on, and adults are a little slower to do it. So that's all going to come a lot easier with this committee on the awareness.
The important thing about the committee also is that, and I used to say this when I was a selectman, and I'm sure it's not what we're doing for today, it's what we're doing for 5, 10, 20 years down the road that are going to be impacted by the decisions we make today. So this committee, and you mentioned about the children going in and having the bell go off. well, that's great, but next year there's a whole new set of children, and then the year after that there's a whole new set of children, year after that. And we just recently did a program with an Eagle Scout who I first met when he was a second grader coming into my
Declan Maloney.
Declan Maloney, right, a great kid. But there's always a new set of people coming up. There's a new generation. You know, you say it with your daughter with lacrosse, and you know, it's so important that we continue doing the same message. And it's unfortunate that you have to, but at the same time, it's important to understand that that's how you create change. By continually beating the drum, continually giving the message, continually giving a consistent approach. So that's why this committee, I think, is so important.
So exactly. The continuity of it. So as I said at the beginning, this committee's set. We set it in November. The selectmen raised their hand and said that this is a good idea. It runs out in December. And the reason it runs out, because we didn't want to go in a direction as we're learning this to do it wrong or to not cover all the bases. It was kind of a learning. What this article is, Article 22 on May 12th, is it sets it permanently in our bylaw. Now, selectmen come and go, in the issue of the day fades.
Sure.
So we could get different selectmen coming up and find this not important, and the committee just kind of fades away. What this article does is it puts it in the permanent bylaw. So when you open up our Bible or our bylaws, it says in 2014 we thought it was important enough to put it in our permanent bylaw, and it's there. The only way you can get rid of it is by town vote, not by change of selectmen. Part of the protocol is this committee, every 3 years it's going to change. Okay, people can stay or people can go, but every 3 years it gets revisited. Every single year, this committee comes to the selectmen and gives them a report. Okay, the report either says they're doing fantastic work, or they're doing nothing, or they're going off, but it's revisited and it's talked about.
But they'll also be reporting to the town, to the annual report.
Exactly.
As part of that, each standing committee gives a report.
You know, that's a good, I didn't think of that, but that's a good point. It's going to be in the annual report every year.
And that's a great way also for the town to understand progress and to see that attention is still being laid. There's so many committees that people may look, the Canoe River Aquifer group, people looking and go, well, why? Well, that's a huge issue, and it still is. But only a certain number of people really understand what those issues are as far as the environmental impacts, the importance of keeping that watershed clean. And so, these are good things, and this is a good start for this committee.
So you always think of, once you get to town vote, what's the pushback going to be? Why would people be against this? So you look at our town bylaws, and a lot of the stuff that's, we've got 50 plus committees, they're not in the town bylaw. The Canoe Committee Aquifer is not in the bylaw. Why should this be in the bylaw and not, what gives us more power over the other one? So you look at how things get in the bylaw. You've got a zoning board, it's mandated by the state, that's in the bylaw. You've got a conservation commission mandated under mass law, it's got to be in the bylaw. Historic commission has to be in the bylaw. We have a permanent building committee that is not mandated by the state, but the town government, our town government, Foxborough, thought it was important to put it in there, so it's in there. My thought process on this is, we can mandate the brick and the mortar in the history and all the buildings and the advisory committee for the finance, but there's nothing in there to protect arguably the most precious commodity that we have is the children. So put it in the bylaw. It speaks to the past. It basically says we thought it was important. We're learning from the mistakes, and moving forward, we're going to make sure that we do our best that it doesn't happen again. But if it does, it's going to be exposed very, very quickly. And that's the whole objective to this. And the other, we've been hearing kind of on the side, well, once it's in the bylaw, then you take liability if it's not followed. And I couldn't disagree with that more. By ignoring it, there's more of a liability. And I know, if it's in there, all the training, I think the insurance company is going to be very, very happy that this is in the forefront, and all this proactive stuff and putting it in our bylaw will actually put the downward pressure on the insurance.
It's interesting you say that, because everybody is concerned about liability. You don't want to take on more liability, but the beauty of America, if you will, is that anybody can be sued for anything. So the thought that you're inviting liability is sort of a red herring, because it doesn't matter whether you do or don't have the committee. You're still open. We as a community are still open to the liability for anything that could happen. A pothole in the street, somebody breaks an ankle. There are laws that protect a municipality, but there is still the ability for a citizen to bring suit against the town, and whether it's thrown out or acted upon, that's part of the justice system. So to suggest that by having this committee would invite or open us up to additional liability, it's not really true, and I don't see how that argument would stand the test when you consider it doesn't matter whether you have the committee or not.
Yeah,
you still have liability.
You know, the argument. Someone brought up an example. The old way of doing things, or thinking about things, was, you know, the sidewalk out on the street. Well, if you shovel it, if the town shovels it and does a bad job, and someone slips and falls, there's a liability because you didn't do a good job. But if you don't shovel it, there's no liability because you didn't do a bad job. Yeah. So that whole process is in the past. I think this generation is saying, you know, if there's an issue, address it. Period. Let the chips fall where they will. There's a liability to coach. If you're a volunteer coach, there's a liability. So, you know, don't coach and you don't get that liability. So I think this will, you know, it'll go fine on May 12th. May 12th.
Article 22.
Yeah, but I want people to understand what it's about, not just raise their hand and support it, because there's a lot of, you know, this group has reached out to every corner of the town, and they're working very hard on this. And, you know, you said it earlier, it's 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if we can make the difference in one kid's life. Now, I've met a lot of these victims through this process, and they're, you know, right now they're parents, they're grandparents, and a lot of these lives are kind of in shambles. You know, they've got issues, they've, you know, drugs, whatever, and it can kind of come back to when they were 7, 8 years old. If we can change one kid from having to go through a whole life of that in their families, it's a no-brainer.
Well, cuts often leave a scar, and whether you can see it or not, it's there. And so shining the light on it is not the solution, but it is a step. And creating this committee is not the ultimate solution, but it is a significant step towards ensuring that we do everything that we as a community can do to prevent this from happening again.
Now, and what I'm also seeing is when you say, you know, you kind of wrap your arms around Foxborough and call it a community. We looked, I've been to seminars and sessions and you know, all the different groups around the state. Nobody has this, and it's not mandated by the state. And you know, the people that I've been talking to at the state level and higher up, they're looking forward to this. And I think this is going to be the catalyst for the state to wake up and say, hey, this is as important as a historic committee, so let's mandate it for the towns. Now, I won't say the town because they're in the process right now, but we're just approached by a surrounding town, by their police department, that they want to do the exact same thing. So they're looking for all of our documents and our input so they could bring it to their town meeting. So 10 years from now, this may be the norm, and we might not be the exception. So, you know, I think it's, you know, worst case, if this gets passed and the state has an issue with it, I think, again, that's going to be a catalyst for the state to get, you know, we'll get the focus on the state and then change it at that level. And I know, you know, when this thing first came to the table, Mark Sullivan was the one that said, we've got to change it at the state level. You know, this is local, but we need to do a better job at the state. And he's been very, very active in this, trying to get more people to listen. So.
Well, you know, credit to the victims for coming forward and putting this on the table, and willing to publicly make it an issue. And credit to Selectman Sullivan and former Selectman Walsh, and to your leadership for making this a reality. So the message here is that this very important warrant article, Article 22, is going to be on the annual town meeting warrant this May 12th at the high school. Everybody should come to town meeting anyway. Don't think that just because Article 22 is on there that this is your calling. That said, one of the beauties of our form of government, the town meeting form of government, is that people will come out and support something if they feel passionately about it. And this is certainly something to rally behind, and something that, at least in my opinion, and I hope many of you feel the same way, should rally behind and come out and support. So Article 22, you're looking for a yes vote. I'm sure many of us are. And we hope to see everybody out at town meeting on May 12th. Until then, and on behalf of all the volunteers of Foxborough Cable Access, thank you for watching this and our continuing local government series as we help you understand the issues on the table and on the warrant for our annual town meeting. Until next time, and until May 12th when I see you at annual town meeting, have a great day, Foxborough.